Fantastic. Right, welcome back everyone to the first of the afternoon sessions. And I thought, as it's the first one after lunch, we'll do something a little fun with IWS. We'll have a bit of a play time. One of the things that we always try and do is to look at areas of IWS that are new and you may not be doing in your environments today, but it could be of interest either within your environment or for your own personal education when you're at home. Because I know you think about work all the time, don't you, Nige?
I'm thinking about it now.
So what we're going to look at is observability in IWS using Prometheus and Grafana, which are two open source pieces of software that are supported within IWS now. So in this session, we'll look at what observability is, how do we use it within IWS, in particular with first Prometheus and then Grafana. The two go hand in hand. So one gathers the data, which is Prometheus, and then Grafana is a dashboard, open source dashboard technology that actually shows you information that's coming out of IWS. And then I'll do a little demo, and then there's even homework on here as well. So if you want to try it out yourself, you can do, because the IWS master that I'll be working with is exposed on the internet. Which sounds really rude, but it's not. Okay, so what is observability? Well, observability is the new name for monitoring. It's
so much more than that.
It's so much more than that. Yes, I know. Yes, about 50 quid an endpoint more. Yes. So yes, monitoring just tells you what's wrong. Observability enables you to understand why. So we're gathering information, we're looking at changes, so it's observing what's going on within your IWS environment. And what that means is that improved availability improves customer satisfaction. I'll skip over some of these slides. They're more for reference rather than, kind of, they come from a sales slide deck, actually. So I don't want to be too salesy. I just want to go into it and show you what it means. So in the modern world, we go beyond monitoring and look at observability. And we can do that at quite a fine level. And we'll see that within IWS, there's now quite a lot of information that you can get out of it that you couldn't get before. And it's collecting this data can provide some real value, not only within the administrative world, but you can open this up to your management as well. Because if they want to know what workload automation is actually doing, to be able to give them access to this environment gives them all the information they need. Probably more than they're willing to look at, but it's all there. So this is probably the most important slide in terms of how this all fits together. So you have your master and your DWC, your backup master, in different types of environments. So although most people think of Prometheus and Grafana as containerized tools, it doesn't necessarily have to work in the containerized world with IWS. So whether you are the traditional infrastructure, so on virtual servers, physical servers, these metrics are available. Whether you use Docker and use the Docker Compose tools, in order to have a master and a backup, a master and a DWC. Again, it's supported, as well as Kubernetes as well. And what happens is that Prometheus is a piece of software, it's a container that looks for targets. Now, within your IWS environment, you have metrics that are provided. So just like you have with your Swagger interface, you go to MDM port number 31116/TWSD. If you go to hostname 31116/metrics, you get the information that's coming out of IWS. And by default, it does not prompt you for any sort of security. You don't have to put an ID, password, anything like that. That information is provided without any authentication. You can then add that, and you do that in your XML files within your overrides to say, okay, in order to gather this information, you need to provide credentials. But out of the box, no credentials are needed to gather the metrics from your IWS environment. So there are two targets that Prometheus gathers information from. One is your master, the other is the DWC. Both are providing information. And the thing to remember is that the metrics that are being provided are not stored on your master or your DWC. Every time it refreshes, it's refreshing effectively a page. And what Prometheus does is it reads that page and stores it. So being able to chart it, that's why you need Prometheus. It gathers and stores the information that is then graphically represented by Grafana. So Prometheus grabs the data from your metrics, stores it in its data collection. Grafana then shows you the information that's stored within the data collection within Prometheus. So, pretty simple model. But as far as observability is concerned, this is quite basic. Because it's open source, all those sorts of things. Once you've done it, you'll see that there's so much more that could be done, and you'll have conversations internally about, wouldn't it be good if we could do X, Y, and Z? And that's where conversations about Instana, Dynatrace, all those sorts of greater value observability tools can be used. But from a basic concept, a proof of concept, just to show the information that's coming out of IWS, Prometheus and Grafana is great.
There's a question, can you control the refresh rates coming out of MDM and DWC and collect a different rate against each?
If you can, then it will be in the overrides, but I don't think you can by default. I haven't seen anywhere where you can set that refresh rate. Obviously, the collection rate you can vary from Prometheus, but it's gathering the same information from IWS. So I'll have to look into it, but I don't think you can. Marco, do you know if the metrics provided by IWS, whether gathering that information is configurable? Because I think by default, it's gathering the information every 15 seconds, isn't it?
Or the time.
Yeah.
I can double check on the results.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the three pieces to remember: metrics coming out of IWS are collected by Prometheus and shown in Grafana. Okay, so we've spoken about this already. So the two targets are your MDM and your DWC. You can point your browser, if those of you that are on WebEx and online in your environments at the moment, and you are using 9.5 Fixpack 4 or above, or version 10.1, you can point your browser at your MDM, your default port 31116, if that's what you're using, /metrics, and you will see the information that's coming out of IWS and the DWC. And by default, no authorization is required, but you can actually do that. You can change it in the overrides. Okay. And this slide is for our IBM overlords. So there's lots of tools available. Instana is by far the best.
Okay, you can have your coffee afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, there's lots of tools available.
But just on that point, if you're using something like Dynatrace or whatever, you can take your Prometheus and push it up into those as well.
Yes.
So, but if you use this example as just getting the data and what it can do, you could use it with another tool. We understand you don't all use Instana.
Yes.
Yet.
And yes, you can gather IWS data through Prometheus into Instana as well.
Yeah.
So Instana is a manager and an agent piece as well, but it can use Prometheus instead of its own agent to gather the information.
Yeah. And my point was, some people use Dynatrace, don't know why, but some people use that and others. So it's the same kind of thing as Insta if you're using one already.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about Prometheus itself. How does it work to get the information that it needs? So just like we can point a browser at the metrics from the master and the DWC, Prometheus has its own web front end as well. By default, it's on port 9090. And within it, what you configure is the configuration. So when you start it up, when you start up the container, you provide it with a YAML file, prometheus.yaml. It reads it, and as part of that, it has targets, which are your master and your DWC. And again, because there's no authentication required by default, it will get that information. And Prometheus itself has no authentication either. So you can just go straight into the container, port 9090, and you will be able to see the metrics that are being collected from IWS.
You have sample slide decks.
I'll show you on the demo.
Oh, okay.
So again, Prometheus has two sides. One is the data gathering and the other is the alert manager. So again, you've got alerting built into it so that if it finds an anomaly based on a set of rules, then it can use its own notification process, whether that's email, pager, anything really. So it's quite a simple tool, but it's very, very powerful. But all of the information it holds is within its local file, its data collection. So IWS holds an instance of information. Those instances are gathered by Prometheus and then displayed within Grafana. Okay, so configuring the Prometheus.yaml file to work with IWS, what we have is we have the YAML definition on the left-hand side with the information for the scrape interval to start with, but then the scrape config in terms of what it's actually going to gather over that period. So the targets that we set, 2 bits at the bottom, the IP address and the port, 31116 is your master, 9443 is your DWC. The other useful pieces of information, firstly, you have to get the information using HTTPS, not HTTP. And if you are using the self-signed certificate within your environment, if you haven't changed the master and the DWC's certificate, then you have to set insecure skip verify true. So it ignores the certificate, or else it will error saying it's an unsigned certificate when it tries to gather the information. So you set those pieces of information, and then it will gather from the master and the DWC. Does that all make sense? Okay. And then to check that it's working correctly, and we'll do this within the demo, we'll point our browser at the Prometheus container, look at the configuration. So the Prometheus.yaml file gets loaded into the configuration. If you want to change the config, you then have to change the file and restart Prometheus. And then if you look at the statuses, it'll show you the green bits showing that it's up, means that it's connected and it's gathering the information correctly. So once you've configured it, how do you know it's working? Well, you go to status. If it shows that it's up and it's gathering the information, then you're good to go. So what does it do with all this information that it's gathering, all this data that it's collecting from IWS? Well, it's pretty useless unless you link it to some sort of dashboarding technology. And that's where Grafana comes in. Again, open source. You can start the Grafana container anywhere within Docker or Kubernetes. Default port is 3000. And again, it does have an ID and password that's required, but it starts with a default, and then you go in, change the password. And then from Grafana, you set up a data source for your Prometheus container. Again, no authentication needed. And you test the connection between Grafana and Prometheus. Once that's done, we then go to the automation hub, because, as Marco will talk about in the next session, there are lots of useful tools and dashboards that are provided now by the development team. And one of those is the Grafana dashboard for distributed environments. You've got a separate dashboard if you're using Kubernetes, because obviously it's getting Kubernetes information as well. And that's the difference between the two. So in our environment, we go to the automation hub, get the Grafana dashboard, and that comes as a JSON file. So we then go into firstly, we set up the Prometheus data source. And then we import the dashboard that we just downloaded from the automation hub. And then once we start up the dashboard, as long as there are no errors, this is the type of information that you'll see. A nice pretty dashboard that you can make available to other people within your organization. Or not, if you want to keep it just for yourself. So it's something that doesn't take too long to install. I run both Prometheus and Grafana as containers on my laptop, connected to a master within IBM Cloud. And that's what I'll show you in the demo.
There's no obfuscation, there's no granular action with the surface view.
No, the metrics that, whether you have authentication or not, the metrics that you get are exactly the same. Okay. So with that, why don't you see it in action? See what it looks like. So we'll start with the metrics. So just to test it out, you just point your browser at the metrics URL. Here we're doing it on the master. The IP address is the server we have up in IBM Cloud. The port 31116, and then metrics. And this is all the information that's being provided. And this information is being updated. So you have to scrape this information into Prometheus. So we can see the size of message files, we can see the workstations, we can see the jobs that are, and they're by different statuses, all that sort of information. So there's quite a lot of information that IWS is producing. So why not put it to good use? So that's the first test. We can do the same with the DWC. There we go. That's the information coming out the DWC. Completely meaningless, isn't it? Looks good, but
what is it tracking in DWC? People or changing objects, things like that?
no, it's just what's going on. What's going on with workstations, what's going on with the plan.
Do you have to have both files as in one from the master and the other one from the DWC? Or one from them, just one from the master be sufficient?
No, you get both pieces of information, and then you get the full dashboard populated. So you can see there's a lot of information, but I mean, it's just looks nice, pretty meaningless though. So we need something to gather this information and do something with it.
Do you say the status takes only 15 seconds?
Yes, within IWS.
Yeah.
So from within Prometheus, we've set this up so that from the configuration, we can see that we're talking to that same instance on both the master and the DWC. We're skipping over the fact that we're using the self-signed certificate and gathering the metrics using HTTPS. And if we look at the targets, we can see that they're both up, that it's connected to them and gathering that information. So if there was a problem, it would say down or a different state. So once we've got to this stage, we know that Prometheus is gathering that information from IWS. And then we go to Grafana. We set up a data source, which is Prometheus. Because we're running containers off the laptop, we connect to the container IP address on port 9090, and we're getting the information as a REST API call from Prometheus. We save and test, and it says data source is working. And then the dashboard itself is the one that we've downloaded from the Automation Hub. We can see that we can look at the workload by status, and it's giving us a graphical representation of the data that's being collected and actually giving it some sort of meaning. So we can see that the number of workstations that are there that are running and linked, the database connection, heap size, all those sorts of bits of information that IWS and the DWC are providing, and we're now scraping it using Prometheus and displaying it through Grafana. So who's collecting this data today? And are you using the metrics to do it, or have you built your own in-house scripts to gather information directly out of IWS and displaying it somewhere else?
From my perspective, we're tracking it ourselves. We have our progress boards, but they're tied to key job streams. That paints the question around the granularity of it. Not everything is on the grid app.
But
listed law view, isn't it, rather than
yes,
the modifying view.
but with I mean, this is a basic observability tool with a better one, like Instana. The agent will gather a lot more information, so you can tell the agent get this particular job stream information, and there is a Instana dashboard for IWS as well. So if you want to go down that route, I don't think there's one for Dynatrace, is there? Dashboard for Dynatrace.
But you can obviously suggest that you need to customize.
Yes. You need to produce a custom dashboard yourself. Whereas with Grafana and also with Instana, those dashboards are provided within the Automation Hub. I think this is well worth doing. It's a very straightforward piece of work.
We have both, not to be like that, but so our eating journeys and customer journeys there online.
Yeah.
But we are looking for PLC factories. That's been chosen too. Not particularly.
But just to be able to provide this to your management so that they have some sort of observability within what IWS is doing, I think it's a great PR exercise internally.
I'm assuming you need set containers for each of your maps.
Sorry, yeah, if you repeat the question, like
I'm assuming you need set containers for each map.
for Prometheus and Grafana.
Yeah.
No, you could gather all of the information through a single Prometheus, but then it will from multiple masters, but it will aggregate that information and show it. So if you want it individually shown, then yes, have individual Prometheus instances. But if you want to aggregate it all, then just have a single one. Okay, I'm ahead of schedule now.
So there's a question, you're talking about Prometheus and Grafana.
Mhm.
Is there something out of the box from IWS that shows you some of that? So what's the difference between what I get out of the box and what this does?
Out of the box, meaning from the master and from the DWC itself.
Just natively, IWS provides stuff. You're providing different stuff.
Oh, through the workload dashboard. Well, the workload dashboard will give you more information because you can drill down and look at individual jobs and job streams and all those sorts of things. This is more to do with gathering statistical information and displaying it. So you don't, it's not one or the other.
Yeah. And alerting on it as well.
Yeah. Again, you could set up basic alerting through Prometheus so that if a workstation becomes unlinked because you're gathering that information, Prometheus can then send an alert via email or something like that. Again, it's a metric that can be set up within the configuration file that allows you to do that. Okay. I think that's about it, really. The last piece I was going to do on the slide deck was to set some homework. So what I've done is I've set up a set of instructions on GitHub, including the Prometheus.yaml file that I'm using here, so that you can test it out yourself. So the master and the DWC that I've just shown you are the IP addresses are available on the internet, so you should be able to get to them without any problems with firewalls. Our side, if you try it within your own infrastructure, you may have problems with firewalls. Your side, but if you're like Nigel and want to try this from home, then you shouldn't have any problems. So the IP address is visible. The installation instructions are all there for you to start both a Prometheus and Grafana instance within Docker, connect to the DWC and the master. No ID or password is necessary from the IWS end, and then get to the same stage as I've just shown you with Grafana and show you the metrics coming out. And then once you've done that, you may wish to do that within your environment. Dean has raised his hand.
Yeah, so just because I thought I'd give it a quick go and try and access the metrics through our environment, and I can't. I get authorization denied. Yeah.
Which what's connecting to the
MDM or the DWC.
within your environment.
Yeah.
That means that the you must have a file in your overrides, an XML file, which changes it from unauthenticated to authenticated. So, where's it gone?
So it's good to know Dean is secure by default.
Yes. So the documentation on this is really good. You may be surprised. So if you look at the the following page, exposing metrics to monitor your workload, it shows you not only what's available, but how to change your overrides.
That one. Okay. Yeah, no worries. I'll have a look at that. Thank you.
I knew somebody would be trying it in the background. Thanks, Dean.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. I think we're
Well, kind of half a question is the Grafana. I wouldn't call it a dashboard. Well, the graphs that you showed, are there things that you feel are more relevant than others to show in that, or is there like a best practice template of useful things that you found from your experience?
well, the dashboard that I've shown you is the default one. It's the one that maps the data correctly. So depending on which bits you're interested, whether it's the jobs or the status of the workstations, then that's the bit the people will concentrate on.
And can you have a different user having a different view of things and logging on?
You can, but you have to then modify the dashboard.
Sure, but it is possible if a different person wanted to look at different things to another one because of their job role. Okay, great. All right, thank you.
So again, you would need to edit the dashboard, cut out the bits that you don't need, save it as a different dashboard, and then make that available to a particular user.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Should we have